They said no maid could last in that house, not one. I'd heard the stories how the moment you stepped through those towering iron gates in the richest corner of Pacific Heights, you'd be chewed up and spit out in less than a month. It didn't matter how fast you cleaned, how polite you were, or how badly you needed the money. The young mistress of the house made sure you left broken. I didn't come here blind. I knew who she was, Savannah Whitford, 32, nearly half the age of her real estate tycoon husband, Charles Whitford. People whispered she'd married him for the money, called her a porcelain trophy wife. But behind that beauty-tall, willowy, perfect blonde hair swept up in some salon masterpiece was a streak of cruelty sharper than broken glass. And every maid who'd crossed her path was black poor and left with scars no one could see. 9 had run in the past 6 months. 1 slipped out before dawn barefoot, carrying her shoes so she wouldn't make a sound. Another climbed the back fence in the rain. They didn't even bother to collect their pay, they just wanted out. But I didn't have the luxury of running. My little girl Amara was lying in a hospital bed across town, hooked up to more machines than any 8-year-old should ever know. Her heart was failing, and the surgery she needed, well, that bill was higher than I'd make in a year. So I told myself 3 months. Just survive 3 months in that house, and I'd have enough to give her a fighting chance. The gates groaned open that first morning, and the place looked like something out of a glossy magazine. Every stone on the driveway gleamed. The white mansion was so perfect it almost looked fake. But my stomach tightened the closer I got. Margaret, the head housekeeper, met me at the door with a look that said I'd already failed some test. "Follow me," she said. No. Hello, no smile. She dropped me in the living room with a single order: clean the floor. "Madame will be down shortly." I'd barely finished polishing that marble when I heard it. The click of heels, slow, deliberate, like a predator circling prey. Savannah descended the staircase in a silk robe the color of wine, a porcelain teacup in hand. She didn't introduce herself, just looked me over like she was deciding whether I was worth the dirt under her shoe, and then tipped the tea right onto the floor. The brown stain spread like an insult. "This floor was spotless before you stepped into my house," she said, her voice sweet enough to make the words sting worse. "Clean it again, properly this time." I didn't argue. I knelt cloth in hand and scrubbed while the other staff lingered in the doorway to watch. I could feel their stares, hear their little whispers, but in my head, all I could see was Amara's face. 3 months, I told myself. Just 3 months. From there, it was like she woke up every day thinking of new ways to break me. The lemon water test. 3 slices, room temperature. No seeds. I did it perfectly, but she took 1 sip, said it was too cold, and smashed the glass at my feet. A week later, my uniform vanished from my closet, replaced with a sheer nightgown. I came to work in my own jeans and faded t-shirt, and she made a show of sneering. "Rags suit you. You must feel right at home." I kept my voice steady. "I'll do better, ma'am." That calm drove her crazy. She wanted me to snap, to cry, to walk out like the others, but I wouldn't give her that. What I didn't know was that Charles, her husband, was starting to notice. One afternoon, he came home early and overheard her dressing me down for almost dropping some fancy perfume bottle. When she slapped me, the sound cracked through the air. I saw him in the doorway, eyes narrowing, but he didn't step in. Not yet. After that, I'd catch him watching sometimes from across the hall over the rim of his glass at dinner. He saw the accidents, her knocking over a glass of wine onto the white Persian rug and blaming me, or letting a priceless vase slip from her fingers just to call me clumsy in front of everyone. Each time, I cleaned up in silence. I think that silence made him more uncomfortable than any argument would have. Then, one gray afternoon, I heard something I'd never imagined: Savannah crying. I was dusting the hallway when the sound came from her open door. She sat by the window, hair down, face in her hands. When she saw me, she straightened like she was zipping herself back into her armor. "You wouldn't understand," she muttered. "Maybe I do," I said quietly. She hesitated, then told me how Charles's family saw her as a gold digger, how his friends treated her like an accessory, how she thought being cold and in control would force them to respect her. "But the more I do it, the lonelier I feel," she whispered. So I told her about Amara, about the surgeries, the bills, the nights I sat in hospital corridors praying the beeping didn't stop, about how every insult I took in this house bought me one more day with my daughter. For the first time, she really looked at me, not as the maid, not as a black woman she could dismiss, just as a mother. The next morning, Margaret handed me an envelope. Inside, cash and a note. "Take today off. Go see your daughter." I went straight to the hospital. When Amara saw me, she lit up so bright you'd never guess she was sick. "I missed you, Mommy," she whispered into my shoulder. I held her and thought maybe Savannah isn't made entirely of ice. A week later, she invited me to a charity gala at the Grand Royale Hotel. I nearly laughed. "Ma'am, I don't belong in a place like that. You belong there more than anyone," she said, eyes steady. That night, she introduced me to a circle of wealthy donors as the strongest woman I know. I wanted to sink into the floor. Then this older woman, Dr. Eleanor Brooks from the Heart of Hope Foundation, took my hand and said, "Tell me what your daughter needs." I told her. She listened, nodded, and said, "We'll cover it. All of it. Surgery, recovery, everything." I didn't even realize I was crying until Savannah's hand rested gently on my shoulder. I've done a lot wrong, but I hope this helps make it right. Amara's surgery was scheduled for the following Monday. The morning of, the whole staff wished me luck, people who once wouldn't meet my eyes. Ben, the chauffeur, drove me himself. I sat in that waiting room for hours, praying with every breath. When Dr. Brooks finally came out smiling, I knew we'd made it. Back at the mansion, Savannah was waiting at the door. "She's okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, smiling for the first time in months. "She's gonna be okay." A few days later, she called me into her study. "Janelle." She said my name, not the maid. "You've brought more good to this house than anyone else ever has. Starting today, you'll manage the staff. And I want you and Amara to live here in the manager's apartment." I stared at the key she pressed into my hand. Just months ago, I'd been on my knees scrubbing tea off her floor. Now she was giving me a home. Standing in that new apartment later, looking out over the garden, I thought about how far we'd both come. How sometimes the person you fear the most can end up being the one who changes your life, and how in turn you might change theirs. But here's the thing, I forgave Savannah. Not everyone would. Some would say she didn't deserve it. So what do you think? Can people like her truly change, or are some wounds too deep to heal? Tell me in the comments, because I've lived my answer.